What would you do if a so-called friend, blinded by his own intelligence, decided he knew how to raise your children better than you? In today's story, the protagonist's response to a massive overstep is a masterclass in calculated, devastating revenge. I have an acquaintance, Alistair, who has always been a member of the I know better than you school of thought. What makes it even more insufferable is that he isn't a fool. He received his PhD in physics from one of my country's top universities about 6 months ago. The problem is, he believes his genius in physics translates to genius in absolutely everything else. For instance, my wife and I made the mutual decision to send our kids to Montessori schools. And we're very happy with it. When Alistair heard this, he launched into a half-hour lecture about how Montessori is nonsense and we were just throwing our money away. I pointed out that I had not only read but also professionally translated studies proving its benefits. And I even listed real-world examples like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and Jeff Bezos. Still, he wouldn't concede that he might not be 100% correct. That gives you a sense of the man we're dealing with. It's also important to clarify that Alistair doesn't have Asperger's or any similar condition. It's a running joke between us. And he's been tested extensively. He's just a brilliant, socially oblivious pain in the ass. Given all this, I try to limit my interactions with him. But it's not always possible. Last week, we were both at the same group bray, a kind of big barbecue, for a mutual friend, Mark, who was visiting from overseas. I've known Mark since grade school, so it was a family affair. More than just a quick hello. Later in the afternoon, my eldest daughter, Lily, who was younger than 10, came to me looking terribly sad and said she wanted to go home. When I asked why, she told me that Alistair had spent 15 minutes telling her she shouldn't eat hot dogs because they're unhealthy, complete with a graphic description of what goes into them. Now, Lily isn't a vegetarian. She knows her beef and chicken come from animals and has never shown an interest in changing that. But let's be honest. When a kid is about to enjoy a hot dog, the last thing they want or need is a detailed breakdown of its contents. I calmed her down, told her to ignore Alistair, and sent her off to play with her friends and siblings. Thankfully, being a kid, she was easily distracted and quickly moved on. I didn't want to cause a scene and ruin the gathering for Mark, so I let it go. This turned out to be a mistake. About 30 minutes later, I heard Lily scream and then burst into tears. I sprinted over to her. Alistair had walked up to her, knocked the hot dog right out of her hand, and declared that she shouldn't eat that garbage. As many have pointed out, Alistair was lucky I didn't call the police on him for battery of a child right then and there. I handed a crying Lily over to my wife for damage control and pulled Alistair aside. I told him in no uncertain terms, A. You don't ever talk to a man's kids without his permission. B. You don't ever teach a man's kids without his permission. And C. You sure as hell don't ever touch a man's kids without permission. He doesn't have children. So I tried, even then, to give him the benefit of the doubt. Many would rightly say that not having kids is no excuse. It's common sense not to do what he did, making him a fool with no excuse. But I still held back. This also turned out to be a mistake. Instead of backing down, he decided to double down. This was the hill he was going to die on. My kids shouldn't be eating hot dogs. He made that foolish decision right then, completely unaware that his stubborn pride about a simple hot dog would lead to his own financial ruin. keeping Mark's party in mind. I just told him to stay the fuck away from my family and disengaged. I watched him like a hawk for the rest of the afternoon. And he kept his distance. The party ended well. Mark was happy. And I thought that was the end of it. This, again, turned out to be a mistake. A few days later, a child protection officer showed up at our door, claiming they'd received a report that we were neglecting our kids. Specifically Lily. She came inside, saw our home was lived in but perfectly fine, what house with kids is ever spotless? And sat with Lily for a few minutes. She asked her some questions, quickly determined everything was fine, and left. The moment she was gone, I called a lawyer friend, just to be safe. He agreed it seemed we were in the clear but advised me to keep him in the loop. Then, I started working the grapevine. It didn't take long to find out that Alistair, offended by how I'd treated him, had filed a false, anonymous report. And in classic Alistair fashion, he wasn't even quiet about it. He was openly telling people, as if they should be proud of him. I needed absolute proof. I set my phone to record and went to his house. The confrontation was almost surreal. He doubled down again, claiming we were torturing Lily, admitting proudly that he was the one who called protective services, and saying he'd do it again in a heartbeat. This revealed Alistair's greatest fatal flaw, his blinding arrogance. He was so convinced of his own righteousness that he couldn't see the legal and financial trap he had just set for himself. I'm not a violent person, but I wanted to break him in half. Instead, I told him that if he ever came near me or my family again, I'd get a restraining order and make sure every single one of our mutual friends knew exactly why. Back in my car, I listened to the recording. His admission was crystal clear. I immediately forwarded it to my lawyer, who said he'd get the ball rolling with contacts at the public prosecutor's office to see about pressing charges for filing a false report. The wheels of justice turned slowly, so I'm still waiting on that outcome. Then, I enacted my real revenge. You see, after getting his PhD, Alistair had bragged endlessly about the new apartment he was moving into. As soon as he sold his current one, to get top dollar, he had renovated his current place, installing expensive new features that required a lot of electrical work. He did the same for his new apartment. Crucially, he did all the electrical work himself, which is a major legal violation unless you're a licensed electrician. I made an anonymous call and had an inspector visit both of his properties. The inspector, as expected, asked to see the certification for the electrical work. Of course, there was none. I can just picture Alistair, in his infinite wisdom, arguing with the inspector, insisting his work was perfectly fine and that paying a professional was unnecessary. I haven't spoken to Alistair since, but I've heard all about the fallout. He was forced to bring in a certified electrician to examine every single wire and switch he'd touched in both apartments. This meant dismantling everything, tearing open walls, pulling out fixtures, the whole 9 yards, for inspection. The buyers of his old apartment were not happy about the delay. And they were even less happy when they found out why. They walked away from the deal and are now taking him to court. With the sale falling through, Alistair is now stuck paying the mortgages on 2 separate apartments. I don't know for sure if he was fined, but I certainly hope he was. The lesson here is simple. And it's one Alistair learned the hard way: you don't ever mess with a man's kids. His education couldn't teach him basic human decency. So life had to give him a very expensive lesson. Was the financial revenge a fitting punishment? Or should he face harsher legal consequences for the false report? Let me know what you think in the comments.